Hello, good morning, good afternoon, so forth. Igor here, the next video. Today we'll create the best to-do app. So why this is the best among so many of them? Well, a few differentiators. So first we use the new Java 17 and we'll not use any framework. We'll just make use of libraries and we'll explain and set up them together from scratch so we understand everything. There will be no magic, no annotation, just simple understandable code that we know how it works for every line. And one other thing, important thing, is that we will have close to 100% code test coverage, including all layers. So we'll have both unit tests for our logic, but we'll also test HTTP server side, persistent layer, and so forth. So let's get going. We'll use Javelin as a library for writing HTTP server. It's simple. It's very simple library. All of its documentation is on one page. Until it is a wrapper around Jetty, which is battle tested all Java, HTTP, and WebSocket server. We'll also use SQL and Postgres database to store our to-dos. For that we use Joku, which is Java Object-Oriented Querying. It is just a type-safe SQL builder. And we also use test containers to test our persistent layer, which I covered in one of my previous videos. I will link everything in the description. What else? So Postgres, SQL I mentioned, and a Docker as a runtime or deployment, because we'll have a Postgres locally in Docker. We'll also use Docker tests, and maybe we'll also Dockerize our application and deploy it somewhere on the internet. We'll see. So that's the tech we'll be using. So let's get to the code actually. So I have prepared something to make this process faster, as always. So what do we have? We have POM with the described dependencies. So we have test containers, Unit 5 as our test engine, Javelin, simple logging facade. This is required for the Javelin, and we'll also use logger instead of logging to console, but it is something fancy. I will explain everything. Json is for parsing JSON, both to map JSON string to objects and objects to JSON strings. Postgres, obviously, with the driver. Hikari is a connection pool library for pooling connections to the database, and the Joku. So no magic here. Alright, so let's go to the best to do app class, and here we have our requirements. So what we actually need to do, we need to implement a few endpoints. So first is to get to-dos, and we will get to-dos with optional filters. So we have a name filter and a description filter, and without params, because both are optional, we return all to-dos. With the name filter, our to-dos that contain that phrase in the name, case insensitive, and the same is true for description filter. So we have a few cases here. Post will create to do. This will add new to data and return its ID. So let's check to do data. We have a very simple model, name and the description. And TODO is the same, but it has ID, and it will come in handy later on. And put we have TODOs and ID in the URL. It will accept TODO data and will update associated with that ID TODO, and delete to basically delete TODO. Both of them will return empty object. We'll see what that means in a moment. And post and put, so create and update endpoints should validate TODO data, and we have two simple rules. So name can be null, so it is required, and it should have between 2 and 50 characters. And description is optional, but if we have it, it can have max 1000 characters. And our responses we need to wrap in the following format. We need to have a success field, and it will inform us whether the request was successful or some exceptions have occurred. We will have data field. It will be actual response data that client is expecting, so it will be either object or collection of objects for a given endpoint, and it will be null if success is false. And if success is false, we'll have errors, which is just a list of strings with the meaningful errors. And why we are doing that? Usually we do that to have a uniform model for both successful and failed requests, and it is easier for clients, and it's just a good API practice to have it like that, because you can have custom errors, and custom errors can be interpreted by the client. You can also then add something like error or errors details field, and then add some more detailed errors description of the errors that have occurred, but for this API it will be enough to just have list of errors. And I also have prepared the API response object for that to save time, and as described, it has these 3 fields. And here we have also empty object. Basically it is a placeholder for nothing. We can make this final actually. Okay, and TODO should be stored in the relational database, but fields implementation we just have it in memory. And one more also important thing, we'll create a simple frontend that will show how the whole API works, and it will be available on the root path, and we will not test it. So at the end I will add some simple endpoint to show how all the components that we will create are supposed to work, but I will do this at the end. So if you are interested only in backend, you can skip that. And our code, excluding frontend, needs to be thoroughly tested, including database and HTTP layer, as I said. So I think we have everything, we covered everything, so let's get and start coding. Since we will be testing it all, I will start with the test. So I have prepared the best TODO app integration test. It is just starting. Here we just have setup and drill down method, which is starting our app on a 9090 port, and it's stopping it after every test. But we don't have anything here, so let's write some code. So we have the best TODO app, and it will be a RESTful API. So what we need to do here, we need to actually start and stop HTTP server. So we need to use Javelin for that. So I would say that we should have Javelin object here. Here we instantiate, and it is done just like that. And here you can optionally configure something like, for example, static files, and it will expose some endpoint with the files that you described here. We'll do this later. For now, we can just use default. So this will create Java instance, and here with the default config, we'll start it. And start it here, it means that we start HTTP server, which will listen to incoming requests on that port, right? And here, if app is not now, we'll stop it. Okay, obviously right now it will only start and stop HTTP server, but I would say that we actually can create first tests. And since these are integration tests, they will be slightly different than normal tests, so they can cover a more complex scenario in each case. So they will not test single method, but rather behaviors. Something like, I would say that we can test that we should create to-dos and get them. Something like that. And for now, let's leave it empty. So let's write something like some test, just to make sure that our server is starting. Okay, server has started, as you can see, on the port 1990. Obviously nothing interesting here because we are just starting and stopping it. So let's actually write some code. Let's here create a get endpoint. Actually, what do we need? I would create a variable with the path, something like that. Let's call it TODO's path. And let's create get method. So get method should return list of to-dos. Obviously we don't have that. But let's explain what is happening here. So here we are under this path, we are registering this endpoint. So whenever somebody is doing a request under this path, this method will be called. And we have context here. Basically, we have access to requests here, to path params, to query param, to a body. Body is not of interest to us. We should return list of to-dos here. But since we haven't implemented anything, I would say that let's create something in memory here, something like list of to-dos. Let's maybe call it in memory to-dos, like that. And we need to return it, but as a JSON. So yeah, so let's create a method like write JSON response. It will take it needs to take context, Java context, object, Yeah, object, we don't care about type. In the object that we convert to JSON. So let's call it response and maybe response code also. What do we need to do here? We need to write status here, which is response code, headers, and headers we need to set content type, really, because content length will be set for us by Javelin. So let's say content type application JSON, and right now we need to take response and convert it to JSON. So let's call it JSON response, like that. Okay, and let's put JSON here. But before that, let's explain JSON Mapper. So this is a class that I have prepared to parse JSON to object and object to JSON. So basically, it is using Json API. We are creating one mapper instance, and I just wrapped its API to easily to use functions. So nothing really fancy here. We are transferring objects to JSON, or JSON to object, or JSON to objects. And we use that through our application. So here we have write JSON response. And right now we just return our in-memory to-dos. So something like that. Yeah, in-memory to-dos, and let's say code 200, like that. And it's not enough for our test. Yeah, it's not, but let's actually do this step by step. So let's make a request like that. Oh yeah, or maybe let's prepare HTTP client. To make HTTP request, we just use standard HTTP client that we have in the JDK. We don't need to use any external library for that. So we just initiate here. Maybe we set up some timeout for, I don't know, 3 seconds, something like that. And here, what do we need to do? One more thing. We were supposed to wrap it in the API response format, not only that one. So I would say that we need to say API response of success. So what it will do, it will just take this list, and we have response in this format. So we have success true because we're calling this method. Data will be list of to-dos, and errors will be empty list in that case. Okay, so let's just get them. So we need to call endpoint that we have just created. So let's prepare a method like prepare a request. So request HTTP request. We have builder for that. We can say new URL, and it will be HTTP localhost. We give it a port and TODOs actually. So formatted port get and build. This is our need. So what we are doing here, we are preparing get request to our TODOs endpoint that we have just created. Here we will use HTTP client to send that request. Here we need to give it body handlers, I believe, string, because we are expecting JSON, and we have response, and we actually want to test what this response contains. We want to verify it. So first I would say that we need to test that this response have returned proper success status code, like that. And then we would like to test body. So body will be empties for now. So let's create something like expected body, and for now we'll use Json Mapper for that, and we say to JSON, we give it an object, but it will be empty object for now. So let's test it. Body string, but string which is JSON, and maybe we can also test that headers. What do we have here? Maybe let's ignore headers for now. Okay, it works. So we are getting proper empty list of TODOs. So if we go to here, yeah, let's start it because we are in the test. So if we start it, we are on the port 8080. This we don't have, but if we type TODOs, we have empty list of TODOs, in fact. And let's see, headers, application JSON, content length 38, feasible. Okay, so we have simple get method. So let's create naive post method. So how we are doing that in Javelin, pretty much the same as get. So we have post method, that's simple, TODOs path, context again, and here we will expect to get this TODO data. So we need to take body that we have from client, and we need to transform it into JSON. So I would create a method for that, and I would call it JSON from body and give a context and body, not body but type. And let's just call our JSON mapper to object. We'll handle exceptions later, because right now we not handle any exceptions that can occur here. So let's say new to do JSON from body and to do data, actually, because we are expecting to get to do without ID. Okay, and we have it, and we should right now add it to this in memory to do, but we have to do this here with the ID, and to do data doesn't have ID. So for now, let's create something dummy like that. So next to do ID, like something like that. And here we just say new to do ID increment and get. Okay, add it to in memory to do's like that. New to do ID, to do name, new to do description, and let's write JSON response. So API response success. This is our empty response. Not empty, yeah. Not it can be empty. We are supposed to return the ID actually. So let's do that. So here we need to say new to the ID. Okay, so this should work. We verify it as usual by writing test. So let's refactor that. Let's say something like first to do new to do data, and let's say first to do without description, and second to do new to do data, I don't know, second to do, and some description. So we have two new to do's. Okay, and we want to create them, but how we can create them? We have just prepared the endpoint, so we need to call it. So I would create a method, create, like it will return HTTP response, and I would call it create to do, and it will accept to the data and return response. For now, let's not implement it, but let's see if this is API that we want. So first to do create response, create to do, the second to do create response, also create to do. Okay, and what we are expecting here, we are expecting that both of them will return code 201 and the ID that will be returned in the second endpoint, which is get. So do we really want here something like that? We just need to say that this response status code is like that, 201. Same is true for the second to create response, and I would also say that we want to extract the IDs from this response. So let's say to do ID from create response, like that. here we have create response, and let's convert it from JSON to object. So let's call it API response JSON mapper. We need to convert it to object like that. And here we have data. We don't know the type because we have casted it. We have converted it from JSON, which is string. And here we just say data to string, and the data in that case is a long ID. And we will just say long parse long like that. Because here we have something like that. We have success true. We have data something like that, and errors like that. So but here Java doesn't know that, so we need to call it this is an object for Java, it doesn't know the type. We need to call it string parse long. Okay, so here we will say first TODO ID. Let's say TODO ID from response, second TODO ID, also TODO ID from created response, but second TODO create response. Okay, and here we make this request actually, but expected body will change. So we not expect to have an empty list of to-dos, but we expect to have these two that we have just created. So let's create a variable expected to-dos, and we are expecting to have two to-dos. First is first TODO ID that we have just extracted, and first TODO name, first TODO description, and then second TODO name, and second TODO description like that, and expected body, expected to-dos. Okay, let's call it. It will fail, obviously, because we haven't implemented that. Okay. I see that we probably need that as a method, so let's extract it. URI, to-dos, URI. Okay, and here we need to create a post request. So let's create request, HTTP request, new builder, URI, to-dos URI, post this time, and body publishers string. And we call JSON mapper to JSON to do. So we have to do JSON here, and we build it, and we will send it like previously. Okay. We need to throw exception. I need to state that we are doing exception. Okay, here it's the same. Let's see. Okay, it passed. The test has passed. Let's refactor this one. So we will say to this version. Okay, nice. So we can create and get those from memory. Obviously, we haven't covered the exception handling, but we have set up the whole project is set up. We know the flow. So I think this is a good place to end the first part, and we'll continue this series. So like the video, guys, subscribe to the channel, stay tuned, and I see you next time. Goodbye.